O'Keefe. I'm the executive director of Zen Peacemakers. For those folks that I don't know, and I see a lot of friends on the screen, so thank you for joining us. Very nice of you to be here. I do need to say this: if you're not a member of Zen Peacemakers, please join us. It's free. It takes 30 seconds of filling out on the website, and then sign up for our newsletter, and you can get advance notice of things like this that we're doing. And I don't want to take much time with this, but I do want to mention this is a busy week. We don't normally have two of these kind of events in a week. Tomorrow, my guest will be Krishna Das at the same time. So if you're interested, come join us tomorrow. He's been our guest once before, and he's delightful. So it should be a lot of fun. So let's go ahead and get started. We had this idea last fall, and it occurred to us that we talk about Zen Peacemakers and the work that we do in terms of sometimes in terms of these big overarching issues and challenges and suffering on a huge scale, and war and peace, and Auschwitz, of course, and American genocide of the Native American people, and enslavement in the United States, and gender issues, all of these big topics. But it occurred to me that some of the most, and this is my experience, so I projected this out, of course, but some of the biggest learning and some of the biggest challenges for me have been in my intimate personal relationship, or relationships, plural, perhaps too. And I thought it would be fun to and perhaps enlightening to explore this. So I reached out to good friends of ours, and I'm so happy that everybody said yes, and everybody did say yes. So from the Village Zendo, today we have Roshis Enkyo Ohara and Barbara Joshin Ohara. So welcome to you both, and thank you from New York City. And from not far from me, my root teachers, Gerry, Shishin, Wick, Roshi, and Ilia Shinko Perez Roshi from Berthoud, Colorado, at the Great Mountain Zen Center. And from the Zen Life and Meditation Center near Chicago, Robert Joshin Althouse and June Ryushin Tanoue. And forgive me because I'm still admitting people here. I'm also the doorman, and I'll be making popcorn in about 20 minutes too. So watch for that. And then finally from San Diego, Roshi, Nicolee, Jikyo, McMahon, and Barry Kaigen McMahon. So welcome everybody, and thank you all for being here. So what we're going to do format-wise is, I've got some questions just to stimulate the conversation a bit, and I'm going to try to select speaker view here and see if this works. I'm not sure what everybody's seeing, so I hope the view is okay. But I have some questions that we've shared just to kind of get the conversation going a little bit about this topic. And we'll stop perhaps with about a half an hour left and open up for everybody attending if you've got questions too. And I think I need to leave that open because people are still coming through the door. There we go. So I'm gonna, Roshis, I think what I'll do is I'll put out one of these questions, and feel free, if something occurs to you, go ahead and just wave your hand and unmute yourself and offer your perspective. I won't call on individuals. Well, we can be a little more freeform than that if you're okay. So I think the first question is, and maybe it goes to my assumption or my projection about this, is, do you see parallels between your personal Zen practice, peacemaking, and your personal intimate relationships? I'm assuming that there are. I'm assuming that there's overlap, that there's synergy between the two, and there's a lot of energy there. But what do you see, and what are some of those connections and overlaps? Enkyo, yeah.
I was surprised to see that question because, for me, I don't see any difference. I mean, I don't know how I could like put that into my life because that is my life, and I had the good fortune to work with Bernie for so many years, where we really, when you go to not knowing, it's like that's one. And so your question for me was, yes, indeed. I mean, that's what the choice is to teach, is to embody the principles. And then, in as much as we can, given the fact that we also are crazy human beings, capable of not being one with, not healing all the time. So, but to have that as your primary understanding of how to live a life of virtue, that for me is the foundation of a good relationship.
Thank you, Enkyo. Anyone else have a feeling about this? Robert Joshin. Well, I have to say Robert Joshin, and as distinct from Barbara Joshin. So we'll keep it clear.
Are we?
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
you're good.
I feel the same way as Enkyo. We may forget. I think when Zen first came here to this country, one of the stereotypes of Zen was it was a very individualistic practice, but I think it's completely relational. So I can't separate out what my Zen practice is from my relationship with my wife or with anyone else for that matter. And I think we might forget how much Bernie has brought this into our practice through counsel circle, which is completely relational, contextual and relational. And I think that's one of the richest parts of the Zen path for me is the connections with each other and with my wife. We could not have done our work without being in relationship with each other. Mm-hmm. It's a partnership. We're co-founders of our Zen Center together.
Thank you, Joshin. Wonderful comment. Shishin.
Yeah, I'll continue on the same vein, but just want to mention that when you asked for pictures, Shinko and I decided to take a picture with crossed swords, just indicating that sometimes we do fight. And in the 5 ranks of Tozan, one of the verses said there's no need to avoid crossed swords. And that's part of our relationship, and having disagreements, but using that, the 3 tenets of Peacemakers, we work our way through them, particularly not knowing and bearing witness, which I think is an important part of having a healthy relationship. But like what Enkyo said, I mean, that is our life. And I'm just going to preempt a question further on that if the Dharma, practicing the Dharma wasn't the most important part of each of our lives, I don't think we would be together. And I think that's an essential part of our relationship.
Thank you, Shishin. Thank you. Barry, yeah.
Yeah, I really like what people have said and what Shishin just said. Certainly, that's very true. What always came up for me when I saw that question was something that has come up in my life, is that something I always liked when we chanted in service was the absolute light, luminous throughout the whole universe, unfathomable excellence pervading everywhere. And so if that's my understanding, I can't just write off my partner as being crazy or stupid. Not just with my wife, but people I come into contact with, if we want to talk about greater peacemaking. So, and I know without my practice, I would have been just prone to writing her and others off as being, if they're not like me, then they're stupid or they're crazy or just out of it completely and I should ignore them and shut them off. But in the case of this relationship, that understanding instructs me that, well, there's got to be something of value here. So I need to be at least curious and try to find out what that is. And oftentimes I do find out and understand, therefore, the value of what she is of concern to her and what she's saying. And that really helps peacemaking, boy, even though, as Shishin said, locking horns is just unavoidable, I think. And we don't shy from that either. If we have to go at it, we will. But generally, the communication she's an expert at helps resolve these things.
You know, we started a new format of council recently. My friend Sensei Grant Couch is helping lead this around, you know, the political climate, you know, particularly in the U.S. and Europe, and the polarization that we're feeling, and how does that impact personal relationships? So this kind of goes to that, very, like, as you said, you know, if we can pause long enough, if I'm hearing what you said, if we can pause long enough and not go to you're crazy or you're stupid or you're just this or that, then it's a baby step towards peacemaking, it seems to me. Yes, Nicolee.
Yeah, I wanted to add a part of this too, in terms of peacemaking, is really being curious about the other. Is to do othering and to elevate ourselves above others and look down and or not even have any curiosity about the other. And one of the things that I do that I think's really made a difference for us in terms of peacemaking is I practice with others as the Buddha. So, you know, he may be the he jumps out of airplanes. He's a skydiver. So he's the fearless Buddha. Or, you know, sometimes I'm just a scared Buddha over here going, oh no. And then I just, you know, can start working with it. And, but it's creating that space for each other through curiosity. And I like to really work with the precepts here, especially the one, I think you were addressing it beautifully. It's about elevating oneself above another. And in terms of peacemaking, it's a real practice and it's an ongoing practice. Our culture is certainly giving us lots of good opportunities to practice.
Yes, Barbara. Yeah.
Yeah, along those lines, I would just say that it's our complementarity that first brings us together. Often, you know, that we're different, and so the very qualities that may intrigue and attract us initially can drive us crazy down the road. And so that's what I think is the interesting thing about relationship, is working with those differences and seeing how, yeah, they're a double-edged sword, and that's out of them, this third entity can be created. That both the complementarity is essential to creating this third space, if you will, where a lot more can happen.
Really important when you're co-leading, as so many of us are co-leading sanghas. It's really important to have that other opinion, that other view.
Enkyo, and I may freeform here just a little bit, but in that sense, sometimes is 1 + 1 3.
I would defer to Joshin. It's 1 + 1 3.
I would say in this case, yes.
Lovely. I like to hear that. We're better together is the other way to say that, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
Very nice. I want to go back to something that Shishin referred to, and I meant, you know, I looked at your image again this morning with the crossed swords. You know, I thought of the movie Knives Out. But I'm glad you brought it up. Are there, and I love that 2 or 3 of you spoke to disagreeing, let's say, or more energetically than that. And that it's necessary. It's necessary to do that because it comes up. What are the ground rules? How do you get through that without doing harm and be true to how each of you feel and tell the truth, and maybe stand for your position or let go of your position at the time when it's needed. But what are some of the ground rules for that for the rest of us listening to you?
Well, I think a really key one for us has been communication. So, for example, nonviolent communication, imago communication methodologies, it is to have a recognition if there's heat going up on a particular issue, we will sit down and use one of those models. I'm trained in Hedy Schleifer's model work, communication work as well. And that's the primary one Barry and I will use. And it really makes a difference because through good communication, you create a container. And through that, something that could have taken days to work through, we can work through in an hour, maybe an hour and a half. So to me, that's really key, is getting trained and how to communicate.
Thank you, Nicolee. Yeah, Barbara.
Yeah, and I would follow up with that. If we're not good at communicating, let's say we both tend to be introverts or withdrawn, and we more easily withdrawn when we're angry. And so a lot of stuff doesn't get said because the risks are too great to say them. The stakes are too high. So in the event that you find that you're actually not communicating and the months and the years go by, one exercise that we found very helpful is setting a timer, and one person gets to monologue, just, like in the Zen Peacemaker, in the council. So one person gets to monologue for actually 10 minutes to say just how they're feeling, what's happening. No interruptions. Then at the end of 10 minutes, the other partner then gets to say, all right, this is what I heard you say. And the first partner has to say, well, not quite, or, to see if it was accurate, because this is the difficult thing, is the listening to hard truths. And when the other person can repeat back what they heard, then the first person, A, feels heard, and B, there's a chance that they've gotten through with their truth. Their truth is held in this space. Then the second person gets to do the same thing. The timer is set for 10 minutes, and they speak their truth. First person gets to, okay, say, here's what I heard. So we found this a very helpful way to actually get to to communicating in ways where we might be more inclined to just sort of, go into face the wall, which are, a lot easier to do.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you for that. I was going to ask about counsel earlier. I've talked to my friend Barbara Wegmuller, who has shared that for years she and Roland have used counsel in their family, and I think rather formally. I mean, really by the council guidelines, and it sounds like you're doing it a bit. This is a bit of that, isn't it? I mean, especially, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you mentioned the listening part, and for me, that's the most powerful part of counsel. Is I'm in a circle, and my only job is to be 2 ears and a heart.
Yeah, but it's harder than we think, Sean. It's amazing how the mind will distort instantly. We even had examples yesterday, where I said, well, this is what Americans do. And, and Enkyo heard it as, you're telling me I'm too American. And it's good to have that. No, this is what I said.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Any other comments about this? This feels rich to me. getting through the hard part, getting through the disagreement part, or the seeing it differently. And we all know about Faulkner and As I Lay Dying and the various perspectives on one event, and they couldn't be more different. So even when there's just two of us, experiencing one event, we can have completely different interpretations of what happened. June, I saw your hand there. You're muted, June. Go ahead.
I remember that right before we got married, an unnamed woman gave me 3 things, and I only remember 2 things that she said for a successful marriage. And the first was fighting fair. And the
Good.
second was taking separate vacations. I don't remember the third one, but that fighting fair, has stuck with me. And I think that certainly nonviolent communication has helped me, right? To just know, what am I feeling, right? What am I needing? But it's not always that simple, because whatever, the ego, whatever, just jumps right up and I'm right and you're wrong, right? So that's been kind of like a koan for me, fight fair. What does that mean?
Wonderful. Thank you for that. And however, June, I do have to say, I saw your and Joshin's images on Facebook from Anza Borrego and San Diego County. So you apparently took that vacation together.
We did together.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Joshin.
Are we
It's
unmuted?
Yeah, you're good.
So I will, yeah, so what relationship doesn't have differences and fights? And, sometimes I'll have done something that I think I'm finished with, and June will come in and tell me, make a suggestion to do it differently. And I will lose it. I just lose it. I will blow my lid. And in that moment, I don't know who I am. I actually don't know who I am. And then it takes a little bit to, kind of come back down. And then I realize, man, I overreacted. So it was just such a big overreaction for something that wasn't that important. And then, we come back and talk about it. So I think it's also in relationship, it's a willingness to acknowledge that we're going to have different points of view and we're going to have arguments, but also not to get stuck in my point of view, that I could actually realize that I am stuck in it. And then I could come back and listen to June's point of view and see that she actually had a good point. So that happens all the time in our relationship. I don't know about the rest of you, but
Shinko, hi.
Hi, I think Shishin was first.
No, go
Oh,
ahead.
I just wanted to add that one day we had here a couple in love. They were thinking about getting married, and they were asking us for advice. And we said, well, maybe we're not good at example. This is our 3rd marriage. And they said, no, that's why we want to ask you, what is the recipe for a marriage that lasts? And she answered that one, but it was totally a reflection of our relationship. There are no conditions on our relationship. There are no boundaries that we cannot break. We can let the relationship completely get destroyed and fall apart, but we have such an unending deep love that comes from deep from nowhere that always prevail. And because we trust that love that we don't know where it came from, we can have no preconceptions on our relationship. We can break all boundaries. We can be not following the rules of fairness or or anything, no rules. I mean, we are free at that moment. And whatever it happens, we let it fall. And it had been, how many years now? 24 years. There has not been one time that the relationship have not come stronger, the love more vibrant, and that we are closer together to continue on the path of the Dharma as it continues to unfold.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shinko. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm gonna, actually, that's what I was gonna say, not in those words, but that our deep abiding love has seen us through all kinds of very difficult situations which come up in any relationship. But we can always, that always wells up, like she said, from that unknown place. But something that Barbara said struck me about how English is used. And Shinko is not a native English speaker. And she was raised in Spain, but she was born in Puerto Rico. And they use language in a different way than we do. In fact, it's a lot spicier, I might say, which sometimes when she's saying something, I think that she's putting me down, insulting me. And she's just expressing herself the way that they do. I mean, I've heard her mother, who's 92 years old, say joder, which those of you know Spanish know what that means. It's a very crude expression. And so part of it is my having to just sit with the way the language is used sometimes, and how I'm going to respond to that, how I'm going to react to that. But I think that's probably true whether we speak the same language or not. Sometimes when we speak out of anger or fear or jealousy or whatever it is, the words don't always come out sweet and supportive. But I'm just more aware of that because she's not a native English speaker, that I have to not overreact and try and give it space and see what happens. And I think that's how we've abided, is just by providing space, just a lot of space, so that whatever our disagreement doesn't fill the whole space. It's just part of it, and we can see the container is larger.
Wonderful. Thank you. And Shishin, it might be said that even those of us who are English speakers in relationships often speak different languages too, and so that's really valuable teaching. Anyone else have a thought about this? I can move on to another topic here if you'd like. Barbara, Joshin.
Yeah, well, just, from the example that Shishin and also Joshin gave of this, the sense of, the knee-jerk reactivity, which is, can come up, that we have to see, we enter into relationships, and this becomes then the ground at which we become aware of the wounds, the childhood stuff. So when the reactivity comes up, I think it is an opportunity to say, what is this? To actually feel, although it's hard because all the, the chemicals are jumping, and we want to do something. But to then just see, all right, well, this reminds me of my critical father, or my, my mother who never saw me, or so I think these things get over and over. We go into relationships with the hope that all of that gets healed and soothed and assuaged. And instead, what we discover is, no, it just gets triggered all over again. And so to see relationships as the crucible in which what needs healing is going to surface. And we are responsible then for helping each other
Yeah.
to know the other's wounds.
Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Nicolee, yeah, thanks.
Yeah, I'd really like to second that. I think that it is so crucial. And also to recognize when you're flooded. For example, if I'm really upset by something and that's happened, maybe a disagreement we've had, and the flooding is like, you know, where your cortisol gets going and you're in a fight flight. When I notice that, and I find it really helpful practice, I let him know I'm going to take a walk and I'll be back in 20 minutes. I need to move it through my body because if I don't, it's going to come out my mouth. I don't want to do that. So, to that love, that's that space between us and the space we also really like to give one another. And then he'll do a similar thing. And so we let the flooding settle down because there's no real capacity to, for me anyway, to be able to speak in a cogent way, in a clear way. And so I wait till that flooding has settled. And it's such a relief to be able to give that to myself and give that to him.
Wonderful. That's beautiful, beautiful teaching. Thank you, Nicolee. Becca sent me a question that I'm going to get to in a little bit here. Becca, just to let you know, I really appreciate your suggestion, and it's something I thought of this morning. So we will get to that one because but before that, I want to ask, what's been most surprising in this relationship practice for you? And maybe I'm not on the panel, but maybe I'll seed this a little bit with just a personal comment. One of the things for me that has been that really surprised me in a pleasant way, I have such a strong justice streak. And I, you know, I have a tendency to never want to let an errant opinion stand. It's my job, by golly. And it's taken me years to loosen that grip. And perhaps it was Shishin and Shinko were talking about the Hakwon story of Is That So? And I hung out with Is That So enough to really try to feel what does that feel like to not stand up and say, wait a second, I'm not to blame here. It's not my fault. And to just let that be there and that I didn't have to be right. And in my personal relationship, that was a nugget of gold, to be sure. So that really surprised me, and it's with me today. So with that, anything come to mind for any of the 8 of you in 4 couples? Surprises? Nicolee, hi.
This actually surprised me when I thought about the question. What I noticed is that relationship practice has cultivated love and an awareness and spacious mind in a way that I had no idea it was going to do that. But I think it's also very connected to this guy over here. He has a wonderful sense of humor, and his sense of humor has helped create so much more space that it's given me room to see how relationship can really cultivate more awareness. I mean, we've actually been talking about it. Everybody's been expressing that, but it surprised me when I reflected on it.
Wonderful. That's good. That's a good one. Anyone else surprised by anything? Shinko, yeah.
Oh, did you put that hand up? Oh,
No.
from before me. Yeah, I just talking about our relationship. It's like disagreements with no ground. So there is no ground upon to stand when we have a heated fight. There is no ground upon to stand. So it's just trust in the unknown, and those are the peacemaking tenets, you know. Bearing witness to what's happening because it's a very heightened awareness, no ground upon to stand, because there are no concept that we can be holding onto except for what is happening at that moment. And that's really had been the medicine for our relationship. Maybe because I am Spanish, but I don't think so. I could have been from anywhere. You know, it's my practice of the Dharma, of standing in nowhere, holding no ground. And I'm just so blessed to have a partner that can be in the same ground as me. Although, you know, his disagreement might show in a different way, but that's had been the secret of our relationship.
Very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Shinko. Any other surprises?
Yeah, I'll say that and I think this is true for most of us, that when we met, I was a Dharma successor of Maizumi Roshi, and Shinko was a member of our Sangha, and eventually I gave her Dharma transmission. So I know what's right, you know. And when she started disagreeing with me, that was something that I really had to deal with. And when I was writing a book on the commentaries on the Book of Equanimity, she read it carefully, and she kept saying, "This is so patriarchal." You know, what you're writing? I said, "Who, me? Patriarchal?" And so we had to. I would look at it, and I think through that process and through our rubbing together, I realized, hey, you know, this is not a hierarchical relationship. You know, it's partnership, and so we evolved, and I think that she helped me see where I was stuck in that, and I started seeing more of the feminine perspective, and I think got more in touch with that in myself as a result of sharing the Dharma and sharing our life in that way. So I think that that's an important thing, what Shinko said, having no firm ground upon which to stand. And at the beginning of our relationship, you know, I was pretty firm. This is the way you do it, because this is the way Maizumi Roshi did it, and this is the way we're going to do it. But then I had to evolve, and a lot of it is due to her influence on me. So that was a big shift and surprise.
Great. That's great. Yes, yes. Any other thoughts? We can move on. If Enkyo, please.
To follow up on what Shishin just said, I mean, for me, and at the beginning, I mentioned that the kind of not knowing for me is that was the great teaching, the kind of final, after many years of practice, the great teaching was, oh, I don't really know. I have these opinions that I have put together through my life and my biases and everything, just kind of exactly what Shishin says, although they weren't sexist biases, different kinds. And then Joshin comes in with a whole different view of X, Y, and Z, and how I can accommodate that. How can I open my not knowing enough to allow these other thought streams to come in, these other ways of seeing, say, what Sangha is, Sangha management is, or just how you manage the kitchen, you know, from the very ordinary to kind of the most important. And for me, that's, if you got that in a relationship, the other things you can work out. If you've got that openness and let that flow happen between the two, I think that area of not knowing is the heart of the matter.
Thank you. And Barbara Joshin, it looks like you have
A different point of view.
Well, I just want to say, you know, what we all have in common here, which maybe, you know, our audience may not have quite the same situation, but we all run organizations together. And so we have these roles, And I think what was surprising for me is to see, I mean, we've been together, what, almost 40 years. And, you know, which was the beginning of the Village Zando. And so being very active in these roles, you know, Roshis out there, the public figure. But as we know, running an organization is not just about giving Dharma talks. There's a lot that happens behind the scenes. So I think for us to see the arc of the relationship where we're kind of consumed by these roles initially, and then as the organization itself matures, what we're experiencing is coming back to more of a sense of having space, personal time and space to enjoy our relationship. It's just that thought about our roles in managing this third entity that I referred to earlier, that the coupledom serves. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. Thank you. Thank you. I want to ask a question it wasn't on the suggested questions I sent you, but I think it'll be a good one. I thought of this morning, and then I was pleased to see Becca Joshin just sent me a chat just a few minutes ago, and I think we have a panel here of 4 couples, all of whom are transmitted teachers and very experienced in Zen practice, which is not the case with everybody on this call. And by the way, I'm really pleased to see so many of the rectangles that I'm looking at have 2 people in them. I love that. That's great. But for so many of us, we are in committed relationships where our partner does not practice. And I imagine among the 8 of you, given I've been married a couple of times, and Shishin and Shinko mentioned multiple marriages. I'm sure you've been in relationships in the past where your partner did not practice. I think our group here might benefit if anybody has comments about that. About is it more difficult? Is it easier? How is it changed? Any, I don't know about advice, but maybe if you have advice for the folks listening, I hope that's enough of a prompt to stimulate some thoughts. And Nicolee, yeah, right.
Yeah, in my first marriage was very challenging because I'd been sitting on my own for 11 years before I entered Zen practice. So my husband at the time and my children were used to me meditating. It was very integrated into their lives as well. But my husband just had no understanding at all about what I was doing. When I got interested in Zen, I began sitting week-long retreats, which are my favorite. And I'd be gone about 6 times during the year. So I had to figure out how to do that, and pretty much got my mother and grandmother and my mother-in-law involved, and had to find ways of really honoring the different path that we were on, but very specifically in the relationship with my husband. At the time, I had to find a way to reconnect after coming back from retreat. And the primary way I did it is I realized that what I had just gone through, very few people would be interested in or understand. I mean, how are you going to explain what a week-long retreat is or a month-long retreat is? So when I'd come home, I'd focus on him, and I'd focus on my children and ask them about their lives, because it was now my job to attune with them and to figure out how to do that. And I found another thing that was very helpful, which was to cook a meal that everybody liked. So it was a way of finding how to be together when I'd had this very, very different experience. And then I would drive to Los Angeles on a weekly basis to have Dokusan with Roshi and with Matsumi Roshi. And that was, they saw that. So they were forced to integrate. but it was very hard. And the difference that I really feel, Barry and I have been married now going on 28 years in March. And it's been such a difference to be able to be with somebody who really understands what Zen practice, what it takes to be able to practice, and supports me personally. And my first husband did not know how to do that, so I had to carry that.
Mhm. Yeah, I love that story, Nicolee. I mean, what you described is coming out of that week-long session right into service to your family. Yeah, wonderful, wonderful. Anyone else? Yeah, Barry, hi.
It can be a real problem. My first marriage, my wife did not like my Zen meditation and my practice at the time. I was living in the Navy on the East Coast, going up to see Bernie in New York on some occasions. And my wife is Japanese, but she hated Zen and she hated my interest in it. The marriage did not break up over that. It broke up over other things, which I can blame myself for. But it can be tough if the person is really opposed to your Zen practice and you just don't feel you can give it up. So good luck with that one.
Thanks, Barry. Any other thoughts about
I've
this?
had students whose partner does not meditate, but, and this, I don't know how rare this is, but I've had more than one student where the partner would insist that they go to Shishin because they always seemed better grounded and in a better mood when they came back from Shishin, and their life was easier, even though, you know, the one partner did not practice. But I also, when I was living at the Zen Center in LA, and Robert Joshin was living there too, and Nicolee was there quite often. There were couples who both wanted to practice fervently, and they had children, and so they had to work out some kind of a compromise as to who would spend time in the Zendo and who would spend time with the children. And then parents got together and did joint childcare to try to spend as much time in the Zendo. But I think it's, if you're as fanatic about it as you practice as the 8 of us, and I'll include you in it, showing the 9 of us up here, it can be tough if you're competing for Zendo time, you know, with your partner. Unfortunately, we're all old enough that we're beyond that, but those are some of the issues that come up in relationships, which is just the opposite of the question you raised.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. And Shishin may or may not remember, but my first marriage, my partner did not practice. We were living Zen Center of LA, and I would come see Shishin, this is 40 years ago, and complain about this very topic ad nauseum. I'm surprised he didn't ring me out of the room more often. So any other thoughts about this? We can move on if you like. Let me go in a bit different direction. I'm going to put two questions together, and individually as teachers, do you find that you're more or less effective because of your relationship? And if so, how so? And then the other question I'll append onto this, and I know we can handle multiple questions. And Shishin reminded me of this earlier. What would your students say? What would your students say about that? Are you more or less effective because you're together and teaching, in partnership? Any thoughts there? Let's see. Barbara, Joshin, and Nicolee, your hands both came up. So whoever would like to go first.
Oh, go ahead, Nicolee, please.
Mine's quick. I would say that the relationship really, for me, has cultivated much more humility and openness and curiosity. And and you can see from all the things we've talked about where that would especially happen. And I've been very appreciative. I hadn't seen that until I got your question, Geoff. So it's been really helpful, these questions that you put together, just to be able to reflect. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicolee. Barbara Joshin?
Yeah, my thoughts on that is that the teacher-student relationship is asymmetrical. So in the sense that, well, like Shishin, mentioned, the teacher is seen as the knower, and the student is coming typically, for some wisdom or something. And oftentimes I think we're quite happy to embrace the projections, the idealizations that are put onto us by students, because that's simply what it is to be in role, is you want to present as someone who can help. So that, as Nicolee said, it's in the intimate relationship, that's where the real person has a chance to emerge. So whether that affects the teacher-student, yeah, I mean, hopefully it would be in the way to kind of allow oneself to be also vulnerable and share that in a way. But oftentimes I think we don't. And so there's where I think, there's the difference in mutuality.
Mm-hmm. Let's see, is that Bob?
Yeah, so I would just echo what Barbara Joshin just said. I think as a teacher, you get a lot of projections from your students, and often it's in the direction of adoration. And so I think being in a relationship is very humbling and helpful, because you come home, figuratively speaking, and you don't get the same adoration from your partner. It doesn't mean that you don't love each other, but it's not the same projection. You're equal. And in fact, that was one of the tricky parts in our relationship, because also June began studying with me and I was her teacher, and you're in that teacher-student relationship, but you're also in a marriage where you're equal. But in the teacher-student relationship, you're really not. There is a projection going on. I had to be very careful about that, because in our marriage, we're equal, and so I think it's very helpful to be in a relationship as a teacher, because it helps you, you don't get too full of yourself. You come home and you don't get the same adoration, and it's a reality check. I think it's very helpful.
Bob and June, what would your students say about your effectiveness as a teaching couple versus?
We got some students here. You could ask them. Jackie is here. You ask Jackie and Ungo.
Maybe when we get to Q&A, we can do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Anyone else? Any other comments? Shinko, hi.
Hi. Wow. I appreciate everybody's comments, and Shishin and I have been taking different paths in the Dharma. Although we started the same path, our path have kind of the same Mahayana, but it's taking different directions. Me emphasizing more the feminine aspect of Zen. And I couldn't do this on my own, really, if I had not a steady, supportive relationship on Shishin. So having that give me tremendous strength and stability and power and courage to have this supportive relationship on, even though our path had been taking different aspects at this time. So he's invaluable to me.
I'll add though that we for many, many years co-teach. And we see this, we didn't have individual students, you know, like certain students were mine and certain students were Shinko's. And so that made it more difficult than it would be otherwise, because we had to consult with each other. Students do koans, and we would talk about it. I mean, all the students who came to the Great Mountain Zen Center were our students. They weren't my students or her students. So we had to do a lot of consulting about how to deal with students. And I thought that was very helpful for us and for the students as well. And we even gave Dharma talks together. We would work out the script, and I would say something, then she would say something, then I would say something, and she would say something, and we had it how it would build on each other. And that was a lot more work too than if you're just by yourself. You just do what you want and don't worry about it. So I think that we were able to present both of our understandings and our personalities, and both the yin and the yang, you know, to our students. And I think they've got a more rounded picture of practice and teaching. So, and like I said at the beginning, you know, you Sho and Geoff, you practice with both of us, so you might be in a position to say something either supportive or critical, whatever you want to say.
Yeah, maybe, thank you. And it's been 20 years or so, I guess, something like that. And I think my experience with the two of you, there's real richness and I wanted to use the word power in the teaching when there are two of you, because it's, you know, as a student, it's very easy to get, speaking for myself, you know, to fall into thinking that there's one way. And especially if one approach or the other, you know, between two people is more comfortable and more supports my stories that I tell myself, then it's easy to get attached to that and then kind of, you know, to be rubbed in a different direction by the other approach. So I think it's incredibly rich to have this experience of having two teachers, because I have to let go of that idea that there is one, I hate to say one Dharma, there are many Dharmas here, and that and that it's that varied, and diverse, and to be able to hold that and not really have to come up with a reconciliation of one or the other. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but so I appreciated it. Thank you to both of you for all of those years. So, any other comments here about this? Thank
Well,
you.
you know, we've been around long enough now. We've got 7 teachers in our Sangha. So we got all different styles of people that are teaching, but certainly Joshin and I were the founders. And as the founder, we're very different. We have very different ways. You know, I'm kind of conservative, and I like form. The form holds me, and she likes to break up the form and be creative. And I think this just really enlivens the Sangha a great deal, because there's not one way. Oh, right, there's not one way. And I think that's been the teaching from the very beginning when we founded the center. And so it's just continued to be in that way. And also the teachers that have come along after us that we've empowered also are all very different types. So I think that's very healthy for a Sangha.
Yeah, I think so too.
Put that back on.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, Enkyo. Any other thoughts on this topic? Did Nicolee, did Barry go skydiving?
I think he's using the men's room, I think.
I see. Okay. Don't mean to pry. Well, tell you what, I do want to leave time for questions, but just one last question from me. And I did prompt you with this one. For younger people who are just entering or you know in the beginning of a committed relationship, who also both practice, what would you tell them? What would you tell them? Nicolee.
So I made a list here. because
Oh, well, good. I'm glad the question was provocative. Yeah.
I thought it was a great question. I think it's really important to be mindful when you're caught in looking good and being right. So that's a practice on its own in terms and it helps from Zen practice in general and working with everybody, but especially helps the relationship. Another one is to really practice with the precepts. I especially like not elevating oneself above another.
Great.
Be really respectful of your differences, which is what has been just commented on. See each other with fresh eyes. That again is what Joshin and Enkyo were talking about, where the differences and the uniqueness, but the equality at the same time. That's such a key part of our practice, recognizing the one body and also the uniqueness, the differences. And then I think it's very important to have fun and to create, have shared experiences that are outside of Zen, so that you, and have friendships with people who are not involved in Zen. And so you get to be a normal everyday person. And the last one is, this is something that is for me very personally true. This is coming from the teacher side, is I always like to be a student someplace in my life. So I'm taking singing lessons now. But it's just because it's so important, this hierarchical piece that the teacher can get caught in and the student can get caught in terms of you've got the gold and saying that, giving that to the teacher. And that it takes time for students to mature, to find their own strength and capacity and groundedness. And then the last thing I think it's really crucial is to have a teacher that you can be yourself with.
Very nice. Really good list. Nicolee, at some point, I may ask you for just a transcription of that, perhaps to share with everyone who's attending here. Any other advice from the rest of our guest teachers?
I love that list too, Nicolee. Really well done. I mean, everything you said, but the one in particular that I love is the one about being willing to be a learner and bumble to learn new skills. I've developed just quite recently a passion for electronic music making. So I have to learn everything from scratch. And it's really only about problem solving and spending hours, trying to figure out something. But I think just that not knowing and being in that place, I think can be revitalizing. So I love it. Yes, learn new things.
Very nice. Thank you, Barbara Joshin. And June, I'm surprised. I'm hoping you don't say take separate vacations.
No, take together vacations are really nice too. Yeah, thank you for that list. Wonderful list, Nicolee. But I would also say that you're very lucky if you have a commitment to one another and a deep practice that you can do together. I would say you're very lucky because this is something that will sustain a relationship. We've been together, it'll be 36 years in March. So, keep going.
Wonderful. Thank you, June. Any other thoughts about this? I want to.
I have a question for June. I know that you have a deep hula practice that you teach, and I think you teach it through your Zen Center as well. And how does that support your practice together, or does it sometimes cause issues? Because on the surface, it looks like it's different, but I know for you, there's no difference.
There's only problems when we have to schedule the same, for the same room sometimes. No, but the practice of hula is about cultivating this love and aloha in your heart, which is really the same as Zen, really. So it's just a different form. It's this joy of dancing and being embodied. So it complements really well.
It turns out to be very enriching for our Zen Center to have hula, because it's so much from the heart, and her students are so generous and giving, and it supports the center financially as well. But we have had challenges integrating the two, and maybe the challenges have been more for me because I was kind of stuck in some idea in my head of what a Zen Center should look like, and Zen Centers don't generally have hula schools in them. And so when we were trying to market the Zen Center, and you're trying to market to people that want to do Zen, it's sort of a challenge because they don't generally want to do hula. And there are people that want to do hula, and a lot of them want to do it with Kumu Jun because she's a wonderful teacher. But it has been a challenge to integrate the two. It's not a challenge for June. She's integrated them in her life, but as an organization to bring them together, it's been a bit of a challenge. But in the end, it's been enriching for our Sangha to have this a very feminine, strong feminine energy through hula. And I think it's really transformed our Sangha in many ways.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Any other thoughts on that? We've got about 20 minutes left, and I want to make sure that there's time. I'm imagining, in fact, I'm hoping that among those attending that we've got some questions. So let's open it up for your questions or comments. And just to let you know, I can't see all of you. So if you would please use your electronic hand, and it's down on your Zoom screen, it's down at the bottom under reactions, and it says raise hand. And that way I'll be able to see you, then I'll call on you and you can unmute and make your comment or your question. And because if you do it this way, I won't see you. So go ahead if anyone has anything. Lumian Senshin, hi, good to see you.
Hi, I'm breaking a silent vow for the winterage for this month, but I do have a question for any of the panelists or all the panelists. Do or did any of you have an aversion to the institution of marriage? And if yes, how did that affect your partner? And how do you work around this? Because I even know gay marriage in many places is still not allowed, and then my partner here has an aversion to it, so and it has affected me.
Anyone like to comment on that? Enkyo, thank you.
So, yeah, well, when gay marriage became possible, I was like, yes, let's go, let's do that. And Joshin said, you gotta be kidding, right? Why would we want to do this antiquated system? But I prevailed. And so we did go down to the courthouse and had a lovely judge do that. And then we went out and had some Chinese food, and that was it. But for some people, just like taking Jukai or becoming a peacemaker or the ceremony is very helpful. And for other people, I get it. It's not necessary. It's not an important thing, but for those that for whom it's important, I think, yes, go ahead. It's kind of fun.
Wonderful. Thank you, Enkyo. Any other thoughts about that? Or we can take another question if somebody wants to raise their, I see, oh, yes, Laura and David, I see your hand.
Thank you. I just want to say thank you. This has been delightful and encompassing so many different traditions that I'm part of, and my husband is part of. So I'm laughing at different times. I said, what was it I said? The one that Nicolee had said about not exalting oneself above another. And I turned to David and I said, I don't know that precept. And he just went, oh, that was my lesson for the day.
And just hi, everybody. I'm recognizing names without recognizing faces, except Gerry, Shishin, excuse me. Yeah, rings a
He
bell.
can't recognize you. You have to lean forward and say who you are.
Yeah, Gerry, I am David, as you can probably read under my name, perhaps. I don't know.
Yeah.
Anyway, hi. You know, from the old days with Maizumi Roshis.
Yeah. Yeah, David Preston. Yeah.
Yeah.
Good to see you, David. Yeah.
Thank you, David. Thank you, Laura. Any other questions or comments? We've got some time, and this is a rare opportunity. Let's use it. Cuckoo, thank you.
Just an observation. I'm doing a project a little bit with Geoff, actually, that's making me notice the difference in the changes that have happened in American Zen from where it came from Japan and China. And one of the things is that this panel would never, ever happen in Japan. I'm not a historian, but I think it's pretty rare in world history that we have teachers, we have married co-equal teachers. I know in Japan that couples would run the temple together, but they had different roles. The women would run the the practical aspects of the temple, and the men would teach. Anyway, I think this is pretty rare, and you should all be congratulated as being historical pioneers.
And what would ours say, Peter?
I'm noticing. I'm observing.
You'll never hear the end of it.
Thank you both. Thank you. Tom, I see your hand up. Go ahead and unmute and
yes, thank you. So first full disclosure, and thanks for all that you've said in this council, really, for me. And it gives me an insight. One thing, it's an insight that actually I've been pursuing the Dharma in one way or another since my participation in the Wild West days of drug experimentation back in the late 60s and 70s. I always had an inkling of it, but somehow this sort of solidified and gave me this perception. Oh yeah, that got me started. Somehow that experience headed me in this direction. A comment about, and I'm very big on communication. I've been, in my professional life, it's always been about relationships. And it actually started way back in law school in the late 1970s when interested in negotiation. Because in one way or another, whether you're trying to get a case settled or getting a signature on the dotted line, you're dealing with relationship, another person. And how do you bring this to a happy resolution, a happy conclusion? This leads into, so that's been my professional life. And this leads into something that I heard Bob Woodward say. Very fortunately visited San Diego, and he spoke to hear him live, just a remarkable individual. And one of the things he said is you've got to understand their case. He's referring to the political diversity in the United States today. I mean, said it may be fraught with illogic or superstition, but you've got to understand their case. And this has to do with another thing that it occurred to me in the course of my sort of pre-meditative practice, which was from where I was sitting there and thinking, you know, what this person is saying is really stupid, in a group talk. And I realized and perhaps because of the effect of matram had, which has a related overlapping effect to what you get from pursuing Zen Dharma, that if it wasn't really important to them, they wouldn't be saying it. So that this was part of a larger understanding later that I came to that fit into this whole piece. And I hear so much of this in what everyone has said, is that there's certain basic things that moves that we pursue, motivations, like avoiding discomfort, gaining a reward, and so on and so forth. But one is finding our way. And this understanding at a deep level of that, which I've gotten to as a result of Zen mindfulness on steroids, you might say, that's what I call it, is that, and the understanding everyone is pursuing their way. And the appreciation of that in addition to the seeking reward and avoiding discomfort and achieving safety, is this basic amoeba-like drive to pursue our way. And for me, that is very, very helpful. It's something, and so there was a comment made about giving service to the family after coming back from Shishin. Very nice. And I found that in developing a negotiations program, which I did because I was really shocked at how much was spent, and then finally settling on the courthouse steps. How do we get this done earlier? How do we get people together to communicate and get to resolve? And the one was to be a manager of the relationship. That it doesn't matter, when somebody else doesn't communicate and play the game to get things done, they're an asshole, right? That's my response. They're not doing it right, like we want to work together. But one has to be a professional relationship manager of the relationship, even if the other person is not responsive and not pursuing a path that will make sense, period, in terms of getting to something worked out, to some kind of a resolution, whether it's resolving the case without wasting a lot of money and time and resources, or getting to an agreement on some kind of deal, right? Is that one is individually, professionally responsible for that relationship, and to manage it in such a way that and to keep one's own perspective on everything, which is probably can be easy to lose when somebody else is being difficult, when it would be helpful if they just kind of got on a route that we could get this done. And one of the things in either, whether it's to people outside to help them get their job done or inside the organization, is I found it's how do I help them get their jobs done? I pulled pieces. This is in business too. How do they get their jobs done? Of all kinds of types. Everybody wants to get their jobs done, which is kind of part of their finding their way. And I've taken that approach and found, how do I help this person get their job done, whether it's to say, do a good job so that they can get, even they're an opposite number, they want something different than we want. How can I help them get them jobs so they can look better in their job to their superiors, and so on, and so on. So that service aspect. So the appreciation of everyone making their way and trying to provide service to the other person in doing this has worked for me at a very deep level and became an ethic just in the course of my, well, I guess you might say it ends up pursuing the Dharma, as this long course of pursuing the Dharma, even in these very secular areas, so to speak, because it sort of got instilled in me. I sort of seemed to fit into this. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. I want to move on, but I appreciate what you're saying in the context of those experiences of yours and how they relate to these intimate relationships. So thanks for that, Sharon.
Thank you, sir.
Uh,
Thank you.
We have a few more minutes if Nancy, hi Nancy. Ithaca, New York is represented. Oops, for some reason I can't hear you, dear. It's maybe your microphone's not attached. You're not muted, so I don't know what it is. Microphone volume, something.
Does this make a difference?
There you go. Whatever,
Okay.
whatever you did, that broke the logjam.
Okay. So yeah, I really want to thank you for this this wonderful discussion. You know, Gents and I have been going through a really bumpy patch, and that's my husband and the last couple of weeks, and just hearing some of which we know very well but have forgotten is really helpful. And he was really sorry to have to leave. He said, take good notes for the rest of it. But a couple of comments. One is that somewhere along the line over the years, we've learned about, he and I have learned about the relationship as a third entity. And one of you couples talked about that, Barbara, maybe. And that making decisions from the point of seeing the relationship as a third entity and making decisions to take care of that third entity can be very different than making decisions, right, in terms of what each of us as individuals want. And so sometimes that can be really helpful, and I'm sort of aware for me that I'm forgetting that right now. And so that was really helpful to remind me about that. The other thing was the question about marriage. So we lived together for 20 years before we got married. And the getting married was pretty much of a financial issue. And we kind of balked. I particularly balked at getting married, and then finally worked through and decided that we would do it. And it really was helpful for our relationship to have that commitment. It was taking it one level down. Both of us balked at getting the state involved in our relationship. What was that going to do for us? But there was something about making a commitment. And the other thing was, we were shocked to find out how happy our kids were that we got married. You know, whether that matters or not. I mean, and they were adults. It wasn't like they were kids. But they were really happy to know from whatever perspective. But that third entity, hearing that today has been really helpful for me. Thank you and thank you all for your wonderful perspectives. It's been really helpful.
Thank you, Nancy, and give our love to Jens, and let him know that we are recording this, so he can go back and revisit it after we let it cook a bit. We have a few more minutes. Ungo, you've got your hand up, or Genshin?
Hi, good afternoon. I am Genshin, and hello to my Roshi Robert and my Roshi June, and thank you to all the Roshis and everyone here. I just really felt I needed to say that, to just thank you all. We learn an awful lot about lineage at the Zen Center, and I could feel it viscerally in my body. My body is just kind of shaking and tingling, just being in the presence of so much practice and so much truth. It's just, I'm just feeling abundance. And I wanted to share as a student that it is really lovely to watch Roshi Robert and Roshi June together, especially in Shishin, seeing them as a married couple. you know, in their kitchen when we're having a meal or passing each other in the hallway. And in Taisha, when they do share in the teachings, they do often speak about my husband or my wife. And they seem to have a way to just offer us insight just about that kind of partnership. So I really just did want to bow and say thank you. And it truly is an honor. And I'm very grateful to be here with my husband, Ungo, who did tolerate my intolerance of his sitting practice until I began to understand the importance for myself. So again, thank you all.
Thank
and
you.
thank you for leading this wonderful talk.
Nice to have you here. And we've just got about a minute and a half. Geoff, I see your hand up. If you can keep it brief, that would be wonderful. And I'm so glad you made it in too.
I thank you very much, Geoff, and the teachers for sharing your intimate lives. This whole discussion reminds me of something that I only wish all the Zen teachers I worked with, including Glassman Roshi, who was phenomenal. What we never were taught, exactly what you're all talking about, especially for young people, the relationship that you have with your significant other. Here we are at our age, some married, some not, some being honest to say, you know, we're having some difficulties. The Zen teacher and the reactivity of the human being is part and parcel of the whole practice. How can I, and that nonviolent compassionate communication course is so wonderful as part and parcel, learning how to respond with compassion and empathy. How does a person really, really connect in a relationship? We never taught that from our parents. We never taught that in emotional education in school. I would hope that Zen teachers in America embrace that opportunity, because it's really the heart of it all. How do I have a relationship with others and myself and deal with my reactivity?
Thank you, Geoff. Thank you, Geoff. A very nice way to conclude. And I'm sad to say we have come to the end of our time, and I think we could probably do this for another hour or so. But I won't prevail on anyone to do that. So I want to just sincerely thank everybody who attended, and particularly thank Roshis Enkyo and Barbara Joshin and Robert Joshin and June and Nicolee and Barry and Shishin and Shinko. Thank you very much for, you know, opening yourselves up and having thought about. It's really clear you thought about this before you came, and came with some real rich sharing for everyone. And once again, for those attending, there will be a recording, and if you want to share it with others, you're welcome to do that. So I think I have to close now, but deep bows to everyone in appreciation and gratitude. Thank you all so much. And take care of yourselves. Stay healthy. Take care of someone else. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Geoff. Thank you, teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Gratitude.